Well, we're continuing our look at native plants or native flowers of Oklahoma. And of course, here at our studio gardens, we have a native plant landscape, which you can tell is really reaching its peak. It's really starting to bright up with some brilliant yellow and orange colors. And I want to talk about that particular grouping of plants today, which is under the Rudbeckia genus. And the one in front of me actually is a native to the eastern part of the states, but Rudbeckia is also native to Oklahoma. But I wanted to highlight this one because this one was selected as the 1995 All-America Selection flower, and it's a cultivar called Indian Summer. And it's just spectacular. It's just started blooming the last couple of weeks, and in their little promo of it, they say that the flowers will actually get 6 to 9 inches across. And I brought a ruler just to measure some of these bigger ones to see. And from the end of one petal to the end of the other one, this one is truly 6 inches. That's just phenomenal, the size of those. And again, this is Indian Summer. It's actually being touted as an annual, although in many parts of the country it is a perennial and it would come back year after year. And again, the color is just spectacular. Now, Rudbeckia, again, like I mentioned, is also a native to Oklahoma, and Rudbeckia hirschia, or hirta, depending on how you want to pronounce that, is blooming just all across the roadsides in the state of Oklahoma, and it will say from June right up until the frost in many cases. Now, a common name that you may have heard it called is black-eyed Susan, but again, it's in the daisy family. It's yellow flowers. It's also sometimes called the poorland daisy because it takes poor lands. It really thrives in our prairie-like conditions. And it can get anywhere from 1 to 3 feet tall. Now, the Indian Summer cultivar is one that can get sometimes 3 to 4 feet tall, depending on the location that you put them in. Now, all Rudbeckias like full sun, and again, they're in the daisy family, and you'll be surprised at how many different species there are. There's actually over 30, and again, we have several here we want to highlight. Now, the next one gets even taller. It's, as you can well imagine, it's called Rudbeckia maxima, or giant coneflower, and this one started blooming a little bit earlier, but it's probably well over 4 feet tall. It's actually a native to Texas, and this one has much bigger leaves, kind of a grayish tint, and kind of a waxy feeling or waxy appearance on them. But again, you can tell how large the plant is. Again, Rudbeckia maxima, and the flowers are quite large too. This one is actually starting to go on the downside of its bloom period. Now, one thing that you can do on this particular one especially is when they start getting tall and lanky like this, you can actually come in and trim those off, and you'll see there's one right here that has fallen over. And it's starting to send up another sucker there. Well, what I'm going to do is just come in and prune that out right at that point, and we'll put this one in the compost pile, and it's still falling over. But many times, once they're through blooming, you can come in and trim them and get them to bloom again in the fall before we get a freeze, so you can get double the enjoyment out of some of these. Now, I know some individuals as well who will go ahead and prune them early on in the spring and make them bush up a little bit more to keep them a little bit lower growing, and they'll get multiple stalks of blooms instead of one single one that branches at the top. This one too is a perennial in Oklahoma, but again, it's mostly native to Texas, but you'll see it even native in southern parts of Oklahoma. Now, on the end over here is an improved one that is promoted as well as Rudbeckia species. It doesn't really give me a specific species name, but the cultivar is Torto. It's dwarfer in appearance. You can see the flower is much smaller. The center eye of the flower is also rounder, but the rays or the flower petal is not quite as orange either, but really a nice appearance. The only thing that we're finding on this particular one, again called Torto, is an caterpillar insect that, just as the entomologists call it, patch caterpillar. And you can see here on the end where it's starting to skeletonize our foliage, meaning it just eats all the green off, leaving the veins. And in some cases it's quite severe, and we see the little caterpillar droppings. But over here is a plant that has actually been killed from the caterpillar. And this was an insect pest that we noticed a couple of years ago starting to show up on sunflowers. and then it will also get on the Wadilia, or the Indian daisy it's called, or the Indian runner, which is really Singapore daisy. And even on the Indian summer rudbeckia, we noticed a little bit of the skeletonizing. Now, on the giant coneflower, the leaf is smoother. It's not rough and sandy like this one, so we haven't seen them on that particular one. It seems to be only on plants that has a rougher appearance or texture on the foliage. Now, sometimes the rudbeckias, you'll hear them called coneflowers, and really that's probably not an accurate name, although the next one I want to show you in the perennial garden is called green wizard coneflower. It too is a rudbeckia. It's Rudbeckia occidentalis. And the thing about this particular one is that it really just puts up the center eye, and it has green petioles. There's no color to it whatsoever. It's kind of one of those novelty type plants. It's really not that attractive. It definitely doesn't have any showy color, but again, it's the dark brownish eye with the green petioles, so they say that it's a green flower, which, you know, that's not very common. But again, that particular one is a cultivar called green wizard. Now, true enough, there is another genus of plants called Echinacea that is referred to as the coneflower, and most of us refer to it as the purple coneflower because that's probably the most common one. We have one blooming now in our Indian garden. Again, it's purple coneflower, but those also come in pinks, which is a very different color. And this year in our all-white garden, we have a white coneflower, one called a cultivar of white swan is the particular name on it. Beautiful white petals again. And that one truly is referred to as the coneflower, but the genus is different, Echinacea. Now, if you're driving along the side of the road and you're looking for some of the wild Echinaceas or the wild rudbeckias, you're also going to see some other prominent yellow type flowers this time of year. Coreopsis, and there's all kinds of those blooming across the state. A little bit smaller flower, much more dainty and delicate, as well as there's also some of the Helianthus species growing across the state, which is related to the sunflower or the Jerusalem artichoke, and those are starting to bloom as well later on in the summer and early fall. So you're going to see all kinds of different wildflowers along the state this year. Well, we've been talking a lot about native plants or native flowers, and of course some of the improved hybrids or cultivars that originated from native plants here in Oklahoma. And there are literally hundreds upon hundreds of them located across the state. And this is a sure case of when it's a great time to have some good reference books. And I want to show you some of my favorite ones. Now, obviously, you want to get as specific as you can for your particular geographical or growing region. And that's some of the ones I want to show you. Believe it or not, there is a book called Oklahoma Wildflowers, and it's written by Dr. Doyle McCoy. It's a great book. It's got not only colored photographs in it, but it gives you some nice introductions about some of them, genus, species, a little bit about where you'll find them. There's also some very specific ones on Missouri wildflowers and Texas wildflowers, and obviously some of the same flowers that grow in those neighboring states also are native to Oklahoma. So those are good ones that expand the types of wildflowers that you can find. And of course, there's always the generalized books that are more for the United States as a whole, and you have to know a little bit about it to start with to know if they're specific to our particular state. But I think where most people get in trouble is when they're trying to grow wildflowers, especially if they plant the seeds in the fall, and then the seedlings come up next spring. It'd sure be nice to have a reference of a book that you could use to see what the seedling looks like. And here's one called Wild Seed Farms, which actually is a seed catalog, and it's from Eagle Lake, Texas, out of Texas. It's a mail-order seed company. But not only does it give you some cultural things about wildflowers, but you'll notice in the catalog it has a picture of a flower as well as what the little seedling would look like and then where in the United States it would grow. So what you want to do is look for any type of reference that will help you out in the selection of them, especially if you can find some of those in the seedlings. So again, check your local garden centers, check your bookstores to see what you can find, because there's so many out there. Any kind of good reference book will help you out in the long run as well.